Hello everybody, and welcome to the first in a series of videos that corresponds to class on May 5th of 2020. So as you all know, today is the last class that we're going to have for this semester, and what I'm going to be doing today is I'm going to be walking you through what I'm going to expect from you for your final projects. So if you recall, last week we used a weighted displacement quotient calculator to estimate the effects of a hypothetical intervention. And in addition to having data on violent crime changes in the Excel file that I provided you with, I also had information on some activities that police officers engaged in, both before this hypothetical intervention was put in place, as well as during this hypothetical intervention. So as I said last week, I didn't expect you to work with those data yet. However, I told you to keep that Excel file because that's what we were going to be working with to complete the final project. So we'll be using that same Excel file. So I haven't uploaded a new one since you already completed this, and hopefully you still have it saved somewhere. If you don't, you'll have to go back to last week's folder and download the data and redo the analysis. The things that you did last week to get caught up for the midterm project. Right, so after working with these data, and I'm going to explain to you what you're going to need to do, what I'm going to expect you to do is present the results of this experiment, and I'll tell you exactly what I'm looking for in this presentation. And we actually take a step back. We shouldn't call this an experiment because it's not a real experimental design, but we're evaluating the impacts of a proactive deployment plan in Nicetown by the Nicetown Police Department, which of course is a completely fictitious department. All right, so I'm going to expect that you either do a voiceover PowerPoint as I've been doing, or if you'd like, you can actually put a video of yourself together giving the presentation. And so if you've got a computer screen that you can stand in front of and record yourself with your phone and you want to do that, that'll work. Or if you want to do as I've been doing, which is have a PowerPoint up and you're simply speaking into a microphone, that will suffice as well. I won't expect one or the other. You can use either. In terms of software, you could Google FreeCam. That's the software that I've been using to do my PowerPoint voiceovers. It's really simple once I got the hang of it. I picked it up pretty quickly. So you can go ahead and download that software for this project if you'd like to do the voiceover. If you're doing an actual video of yourself, you could just simply use your phone or any other means to record yourself side by side or next to your screen where you're actually talking to the camera and giving this presentation. I'll give you those two options. Alright, so in terms of the project itself, if you haven't already, I'd go ahead and download the PowerPoint template that I've posted for you on Blackboard. And so I've started putting this together for you, and I'm going to expect you to change a few things. Alright, so first thing you'll notice is we've got a title slide. So it's going to be pretty conventional to have a title slide that kind of gives a name of the presentation that you're going to be giving, as well as your name, your position, which we'll assume you're a crime analyst, and the date of the presentation. So how presentations tend to work in police departments is, and this is really going to vary from department to department, but in like large departments like New York or Philadelphia, we might have a crime analyst who is going to go up in front of a room of police commanders and explain the effects of this particular intervention. So they're going to walk the police commanders through what was done during this intervention and what the results were. So you'll start off your presentation probably in a room with police commanders, and once they settle in, you'll already have this title slide up on your screen and you'll be ready to go. So what you'll do with the title slide up is you'll say, good afternoon everybody, my name is Evan Sorg and I'm a crime analyst with Nicetown, and what I'm going to be doing today is presenting to you the effects of an intervention that we evaluated that involved a proactive deployment plan in some of our sectors and business as usual in another group of our sectors. And I will talk a little bit more about what actually happened in the next slide, but with this slide up, you'll just want to introduce your audience to the topic. One thing I like to point out when I'm talking about giving presentations, because this is something that I see pretty commonly, probably won't be an issue with this class because we've switched to online, but when students give presentations in person, it's very common for them to get up in front of the room, be very nervous, which is completely natural, and say to the audience, I'm really nervous giving this presentation. Don't do that. Right? That's unprofessional. Right? You don't want to put yourself in a vulnerable position at the very beginning of your presentation, because there's a potential that people aren't going to take you seriously. Also, even though you're probably going to be nervous, especially in the beginning, giving presentations, I can guarantee you that you don't appear to be as nervous as you sound. Right? So people automatically think, or as nervous as you think, I should say. Right? People automatically assume that because they feel so nervous inside, their audience can tell that they're nervous. And that's very rarely the case. And usually as you go, even if you have some hiccups in the beginning, you get more comfortable as your presentation progresses. Right? So don't get up there and say, I'm really nervous doing this presentation. Right? Just get right into it once everyone is settled in, introduce yourself, and introduce the topic of the presentation. So moving forward, what we'll assume with this presentation is that we've got a room of police commanders who are listening to us because they want to know what the results of this intervention were. Also assume that you've been given about 10 minutes to give this presentation. So you do want to keep presentations to an audience of police commanders pretty brief, and I think 10 minutes is probably just about the right amount of time so that you're able to discuss the important aspects of the intervention, but also that you're not going into so much detail that you lose your audience. Right? Remember, you have to know your audience when you're giving a presentation. And so although you've put a ton of time into evaluating this intervention and you used all sorts of things in Excel like pivot tables, that's really not pertinent information that police commanders are going to need to know. Right? So you want to leave that stuff aside. And so after you introduce yourself and the intervention, what you'll do is you'll click to your next slide, which will detail what actually was involved in this intervention. And now normally I would not have a slide with this many bullet points and words on the screen. The reason I say that is because people tend to use PowerPoints and bullets as a crutch. And so it's something you might have noticed with some of your professors perhaps, or with some of your peers if they've given presentations, where they've got a PowerPoint projected, there's bullet points, and they're simply reading those bullet points to the audience. Right? But that's not a presentation, that's reading bullet points. So I normally wouldn't have this many bullet points up on the screen. If you switch back to last week's videos when I was talking about the Philadelphia Foot Patrol experiment, you'll probably recall that I had a bunch of pictures. And although I did have some words, I did not read those words off of the screen. I tend to, and I think it's best practice, to use bullet points as kind of a cue for yourself. Right? So I look at a bullet point, I have a phrase there, or I have a quote there, and I can now recall, because I've prepared for this presentation, what I'd like to say. But nevertheless, because this is fictitious and I made this intervention up, I've provided you with this slide, and I'm going to allow you to use this slide in your presentations. So what we're going to assume for this final project is that we've introduced a 3-month intervention in Nicetown. And what we did is we randomly put Nicetown's 16 sectors into either a treatment group or a comparison group. And if you haven't noticed, I've been using words like treatment and target interchangeably. It's really the same thing. Probably best to keep consistent. So if you want to use treatment, use treatment. If you want to use target, that's fine too. And I've also used comparison and control group. And there's some there are certain reasons why I would use comparison and control in certain circumstances and others, but I'm not going to get into that. So we'll just use comparison or control, whatever you'd like. Right, so we randomly put our sectors into these two groups. What we did in terms of the intervention is we had officers who were patrolling in these comparison sectors just continue what they had been doing. Right, so this is business as usual policing. Officers are out and they're patrolling in their vehicles. Where we're changing our approach is in our treatment or target sectors. So in our treatment sectors, we're saying that all but one pair of officers in the treatment sectors were assigned to foot patrol. So we have one car now instead of 8 who is going to be responsible for responding to 911 calls. The other 7 sectors, or the other 7 cars, those pairs of officers were taken out of their cars and they're told to go out and proactively patrol on foot. So they're not required to respond to 911 calls. If they're in a location that's nearby where a 911 call is coming in, they can respond, but for the most part they're not going to be responsible for that. Right, so that's what we'll assume that this fictitious intervention involved. And so in terms of giving your presentation, as I said, I don't want you to just read bullet points. I want you to be able to speak naturally about what happened. So you would have this slide up and you would give me, or give your audience, the details of the intervention that I just covered. Right, and so after you've introduced yourself and the title, you've talked about the intervention, the next thing you're going to want to do is you're going to want to talk about what the officers actually did during the intervention. And for a refresher on how to do this, you can go ahead and look at last week's videos where I discussed the Philadelphia Foot Patrol experiment. And what I've done for this PowerPoint is I've left some of those slides in for you. And I'm going to allow you to just edit these line graphs. Right? We learned how to make line charts. We don't have to, I'm not going to expect you to do this in a PowerPoint. So I've just left it in here for you. But you are going to have to change them. Right? And again, these are just simply line charts that I've put some animation to, which I'll talk about. So I would just go to the insert chart and I would insert a line chart and enter the data as necessary. Right, so I'm getting close to my 15-minute limit here. So pick up in a second video where I'll talk about the analyses that you're going to have to complete in order to be able to fill in these different slides on pedestrian stops, detected drug activity and arrests, and violent crime. Right, so although these are in here for you, it doesn't have the information that you're going to need. So in the next video, I'll go ahead and walk you through what you'll need to do to fill these in. Right, so I'll see you there.